This feature is powered by Digicel. Digicel, better together.
We all the young youth coming to shake the wind. Them youth from Lucky John Dial and Rockborough will be coming down to play real master Scarborough. So if you tackle me, well then you in misery. You see a jamming go beyond the dancing. Bum pim pim pum pim pum pim pim pum pum pim pum pim pim pum 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 pim pum pim pim pum pim pum pim pim pum pum pim pum pim pim pum 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 pim.
Serene, unspoilt, rich heritage. That's Tobago in a coconut shell. For so many people, Tobago is the perfect long weekend getaway, head to the beach and like yourself venue. And for others, it's the ideal place to call home. Somewhere, if given the chance, they would never leave, like the Ita Cascadura. But behind this idyllic exterior, Tobago bears a unique history that most of us either forgot or never really knew about. Each part of the beautiful island comes with its own story, a special story that led to Tobago as we know it today. Let's take Scarborough for instance. Maybe at one point in your life you would have heard that Scarborough was the most fought over settlement in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, and probably the Caribbean to be honest. Or maybe this is the first time you're hearing it. But it's true. Scarborough went from hand to hand like a susu. But despite this fact, one thing remains. It was always a main port and center of administration in Tobago, and the place that would become the capital of the island. So let's go back, way back, to 1654, when the area was first settled. Two Dutch brothers, Adrian and Cornelius Lamsens, created a settlement they called Lamsensburg. Yep, right where modern-day Scarborough is. On the other side of Lamsensburg, there was another settlement. That one was for the Courlanders. So essentially, there was a Dutch settlement and a Courlander settlement. Now, enter the Swedes, and the year is 1658. They would capture the Duke of Courland. The Dutch, wanting Tobago all for themselves, took advantage of that move by the Swedes and took control of the settlement at Courlanders. By doing that, they became the top dogs of Tobago. Ruff, ruff. But that wasn't for long, and it was from that moment onwards that the Scarborough Susu began. The Duke of Courland was released in 1664, and as luck would have it, he was the King of England's godson. So you tell me, what would you do if the King of England were your godfather and you wanted back what you thought was yours? Of course, you'd go to him. Duh. Clearly, the Swedes didn't do their homework, because in my opinion, that wasn't too smart of a move. And 2 years later, an English fleet attacked Dutch Tobago, totally destroying Fort Lamsensburg. But the hand-changing didn't stop there. Oh no, it was France's turn to get their hand, and French soldiers attacked the British. And if you thought that was the end, think again, because there's more. The Dutch came back and took control. Then the British, then the Dutch. The Dutch, who seemed to love Tobago more than life itself, stayed in control for a little bit when they made Fort Lamsensburg into a permanent settlement with broad streets, sturdy houses, and a church. They also built a large warehouse at the wharf where they would be able to trade. This star-shaped fort was where they housed the soldiers' quarters and an arsenal of gunpowder, among other things. Keep this in mind, the part about the gunpowder especially, right? Scarborough would go on to change hands at least 30 times in 100 years. 33 if we're being exact. The most times in Caribbean history. It's actually a record. Hashtag Bago Body. And what do you think all this fighting was about? Well, the island was sweet, literally covered with plantations and produced over 2 million hogsheads of sugar annually. Basically, real sugar. So much so, there was a saying, as rich as a Tobago planter. And back then, that was a comparison everybody wanted. Okay, so from one start to another, but a kind of morbid one. The bloodiest event to happen in Tobago would take place in 1677 when the French came to shore with almost 1,000 men. They attacked the fort at Lamsonsburg. During this attack, a stray French bullet fell into the fort. And remember that gunpowder that the Dutch housed there? Well, yeah. Bullet, gunpowder, boom! Fort was blown to pieces, taking it with it the Dutch commander, his officers, and about 250 of his men, making that event the deadliest Tobago has ever seen. After this, the French would remove all the settlers from Lamsonsburg, leaving the town totally abandoned.
Sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is spinning around, and I do leave a little girl in Scarborough town.
It wasn't until 1679 that the Treaty of Nijmegen restored Tobago to the Dutch. And in 1684, that treaty would make Tobago neutral. A neutral Tobago meant that everyone had a right and opportunity to settle there. Even the French, who over time became the least favorite settlers. Remember 1677? Hashtag never forget. So in 1760, when French settlers from Martinique were given permission to return to Tobago, the British, upon hearing that Zeppo, they get a little upset. Yeah, they get vexed. And they seized Tobago again in 1762. After that, people from Barbados began pouring into Lamsonsburg in droves. They didn't want to cause more of a scene, so they found another place close to Lamsonsburg where they would settle. They called that place Georgetown. Yeah, like Guyana. Now, this is present-day Studley Park, and it was named after King George III. And with that, they made Georgetown the capital of Tobago. They would go on to set up a legislative council and the Tobago House of Assembly, which actually met for the first time in April 1768. Now, according to a map dated 1765, somewhere in that period, neighboring Lamsonsburg had a name change, and it was only a matter of time before the British would have done that. I mean, come on. And guess what it became? Scarborough. Then, in 1769, when the House of Assembly was moved from Georgetown to Scarborough, Scarborough became the new capital of Tobago. There's so much to learn about the development of Trinidad and Tobago, and hopefully this episode has whet your appetite and made you hungry for more info on how places like Scarborough came about.
Down wherever nights are gay and the sun shines pretty on the mountain tops, I took a trip on a sailing ship, and when I reached Tobago I made a stop. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is spinning around, I had to leave a little girl in Scarborough town. But I'm sad.
This feature was powered by Digicel. Digicel, better together.